Hello folks, and welcome to GED Microlearning. This is a YouTube channel specialized in the GED math test. So as you know, in the GED you have various questions of different formats. We are going to go through most of the formats in this quiz today, starting with questions where you are not allowed a calculator. Okay, so remember that in the GED you will have around 5 to 6 questions where you're not allowed a calculator. And these first sets involve simplifying a radical. Okay, so question 1 says you may not use a calculator for this question. Simplify in the simplest radical form, and it gives you square root of 49. So let's quickly remind ourselves what a square root is. So whenever you get a square root like this, what this is telling you is, what it's asking you is what number multiplied by itself is under that, is equal to that number in the square root. Okay, so what number multiplied by itself would be equal to 9? It would be 3, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9. So the square root of 9 is 3. All right, let's try another one. So what about this one? What number multiplied by itself is 25? It would be 5, right? 5 times 5 is 25. So the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so it's really important that you commit these numbers to memory, okay? So the first 10 square roots at least, because this is going to save you a lot of time. So the square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. Square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, etc. All right, so let's go back to our question. It asks us to simplify the square root of 49. So if we look at our table that we should know now, the square root of 49 is 7, because 7 times 7 is 49. So our correct answer would be B. Okay, this next problem asks you to find the simplest radical form of the square root of 32. So if we look back at this table that we now memorized, you can see that there is no square root of 32. The only perfect square, or the closest, is 36. So what this means is that we have to break down this number into another set of numbers that do have a square root, a perfect square root. Okay, so if we break down a square root of 32 into the square root of 4 multiplied by the square root of 8, we can now look back at our table and we know that the square root of 4 is 2. So in this case, we would simplify it like this. So you can see there in blue, I said that the square root of 4 is 2 multiplied by the square root of 8. And again, we would break down that further, right? So the square root of 8 is going to become the square root of 4 multiplied by the square root of 2. And again, we look at our table, we know that the square root of 4 is 2, so we can simplify this even further like this. Okay, so the square root of 4 that you see there in blue becomes 2, and then 2 times 2 is 4, square root of 2. Okay, so that would be the simplest radical form, which is option A. All right, so for all these problems, what you have to remember is you have to just kind of take it step by step, all right, and try to do it as simply as you can. Okay, so here's another one that looks kind of ugly. So it says 5 square root of 54. So again, we check our table to see if there's a square root, a perfect square root of 54, and you can see that there is not. So we're going to take that square root of 54 and break it down into two numbers. So square root of 54 is also equal to square root of 9 multiplied by the square root of 6, right? Because 6 times 9 is 54. If we look at our list, we know that the square root of 9 is equal to 3. So we'd go back here and we'd simplify that square root of 9 into 3, which is there in blue. And then you just multiply 5 times 3, it gives you 15 square root of 6. Okay, so that is option D. All right, question 4 is a little bit more tricky. It looks a little bit more tricky. It's not much harder, but because it has a division of a square root. Okay, so here what we want to do is, first of all, we want to get rid of that denominator. Okay, so that's the number at the bottom. the way that we're going to do it is we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by square root of 2. And this will make sense in a second. Okay, so if we do that, at the top we end up with 4 square root of 2, and at the bottom we end up with square root of 4. And why are we doing this? Because if we look at our list, we know that the square root of 4 is equal to 2. So the bottom part, we're going to simplify into 2, and now it's really easy, right? Now I can just reduce those two numbers like that, and end up with 2 square root of 2, which is option A. All right, question 5. So now it gives us another example of reducing into simplest radical form. It says 2x divided by 2 is equal to the square root of 100. Okay, so the square root of 100 is equal to 10. Because if you look at your list that you memorized, 10 times 10 is 100. So the square root of 100 is 10. Okay, and then all you have to do now is, in order to isolate that x on the left side, you would multiply by 2 on the left side, and you would multiply by 2 on the right side. And remember that the reason you do this is because now on the left side, you can eliminate those 2's, okay, so that they give you 1, and you end up with x is equal to 20. Okay, so the correct answer is equal to D. All right, so this next section deals with basic arithmetic questions. Specifically, we're going to work on number lines. So here it asks you, find the difference between points A and B. All right, and the key word here in the question is difference. So difference means subtract. So what you have to do is subtract point A, which is worth 5, minus point B, which is minus 2. So you end up with 5 minus negative 2. Remember, when you have two negative signs, they become a positive. So this actually ends up being 5 plus 2. That equals 7. Okay, another way to think about number lines is if I asked you, if you, instead of doing this, you thought about the number line like a subway line, and I told you how many stops from point A to point B, right? And you counted the number of stops, you can see that there's actually 7 stops, so to speak, between these 2 points. Okay, so that's another way to check your work. All right, so if we go at the answer options, you can see that there's no positive 7 in the answer options. The answer is actually C, which is the absolute value of negative 7. And let's just quickly recap what these lines mean. So remember that when you have a number that is surrounded by those vertical lines like that, this is known as an absolute value. And all you have to remember is that the value inside those vertical lines is always going to be positive. Okay, so in the first example, the absolute value of 3 is going to be 3. And the absolute value of negative 3 is also going to be 3, okay? Because remember that whatever is inside those vertical lines is going to turn positive. Okay, question 7 tells you that on the number line, click below, click where 4/6 is located. All right, so remember that in the GED, you will have some questions where you actually have to physically interact with a graph or a number line, okay? And this is one of these questions. Okay, so when you look at the number line, you can see that they give you 2 points, 0 and 1. And what we want to do now is count the lines between 0 and 1. So if we do that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that means that the number 1, we could also call it 6/6, okay, because there's 6 lines as we saw before. The midway point would be 3/6, which is 1/2. And that means that the first little vertical line would be 1/6, the second 2/6, 4/6, 5/6. Okay, so now it's easy to find the 4/6, which is there. Okay, question 8 is another number line problem, but with a drop-down menu. Okay, so sometimes you will have these drop-down menus where you just click on it and it drops down the possible answers. And you can see that the question is the same as we had before. Okay, so here they're asking you the difference between point A and B. So you subtract. So what's the difference? Again, we would say point A is 3 minus -2, okay, because it's the difference. Remember that when you have two negatives, they become positive. So you end up with 3 plus 2, which would give you 5, okay, which is that option. And again, remember the other, to check your work, if you count the quote stops on the subway line from B to A, you'll find that you also get 5. Okay, question 9. It says, Joe spends 2/5 of his paycheck on rent and 1/5 on other living expenses. In the number line below, plot the amount he has left on other expenses. Okay, so you can see that they give us a number line that starts at minus 0.2 and goes up to 1. So first of all, let's talk about his paycheck. So we don't know what he got paid, but we're going to say that the paycheck has a value of 1. Or if we want to put it in fraction form, we would say 5/5. Why are we choosing this 5/5? Well, because the question is giving us, is telling us that he spends 2/5 of his paycheck on rent, 1/5 on other living expenses. Okay, so we, in order to subtract these fractions, we want to make sure that we have the paycheck has the same denominator or bottom number. Okay, so we would say the paycheck is 1 or 5/5. We would subtract the rent, which is 2/5, and we would also subtract the other expenses. And that leaves us with a 2/5, okay, of his paycheck. So now 2/5, if we divide 2 divided by 5, that gives us 0.4. And if you look at the number line, it looks like the number line is going up in increments of 0.2, okay? So basically, it looks a little bit like this. And now with this new information, all you would have to do is plot your point at 0.4 as such. Okay, question 10. So question 10 combines number lines and inequalities. So it says, choose the inequality that represents the following. Okay, so here you have a situation where you have this arrow, which is pointing towards the right, which means it's greater than, right? And how do you know which inequality is correct? Well, remember that when you have these sort of arrows, if the circle that you can see there on the left is open like that, it just means x is greater than whatever number, okay, in this case -3. But if that circle is filled, as you can see here in the bottom, if it's a solid, that means greater than or equal to, okay? So in this case, in our example, the circle was open, okay? So it tells us that this just means greater than, which is option A. Okay, the next set of questions have to do with percents. So if 15% of the 3,200 people who enter a sweepstake won a prize, how many people did not win a prize? All right, so step 1 would be to find out how many people won a prize. All right, so you would multiply 15% of 3,200. So remember, what you have to do first is you have to change that percentage to a decimal format. So 15% is equal to 0.15, and then multiply by 3,200. Okay, so that gives you the number of people who won a prize, 420. Okay, step 2 is now subtract those 480 who won a prize from the total number of people to find out how many people did not win a prize. Okay, so we would say 3,200 minus 480, that gives you 2,720 people who did not win a prize. Okay, so that is answer D. All right, next question. Sometimes they will give you this scenario where you don't have a multiple choice option or a drop-down menu. You have a blank box that you have to fill in. These are a little bit harder because obviously you can't guess, okay? So you either know it or don't. Okay, so here it says, Jerry, an electrician, had a car accident this year, leaving him unable to work for 7 months. what percentage of the year did he work? Write your answer in the box below. So first of all, let's find out how many months he did work, right? So there's 12 months in the year, right? So 12 minus 7 months that he was sick gives him 5 months that he was able to work. And then step 2 is to find out what percentage of the year those 5 months are. So you would divide 5 divided by 12. That gives you 0.416. If you multiply that by 100, then that gives you the percentage of the year, which is 4.2%. I beg your pardon. It should be 42%, not 4.2. It's 42%. Okay, question 13. So it says, Rita used to earn $7.90 per hour at her old job. She is currently earning $11.45 at her new job. What was the percent change in her salary? Okay, so to calculate percent change, and this is a really good formula to remember, the way that you do it is that you subtract the new payment or the new salary minus the original salary and divide it by the original salary. And then you multiply that by 100. Okay, so if we apply this to the question, we would say the new salary is $11.45. We would subtract that from the original salary, which was $7.90, divide by $7.90, and then multiply by 100. That gives us 44.9%. Okay, so her salary went up quite a bit. Okay, question 14, slightly different but still very similar. Okay, so it says Lewis used to pay $1,580 in rent when he lived in New York City. After moving to Cleveland, Ohio, his rent went down to $820. What was the percent decrease in rent? Okay, so here we would use the same formula. Okay, but notice that the question asks percent decrease. So when you actually use this formula like this, okay, you would plug in your numbers. So the new rent in Ohio is $820, and you would subtract from the original rent, which was $1,580, okay, and divide by that same amount. You notice that you end up with a negative number, okay, and that's normal, okay, because the question is asking you percent decrease, okay, so it's he's paying 48% less, okay, so don't be scared if you get that negative sign. That is absolutely correct. Okay, question 15. A jacket normally valued at $170 had a $47 discount attached to it. What percent of 170 is 47? Okay, so here what you have to do is set up a percent proportion. All right, and just to recap, this is the formula that you should use. All right, so if we apply this to our question, we know that the part is going to be 47, okay, because that's the discount, and the whole is going to be 170, okay, so that would be the left side of our equation like that. All right, and that's all you have to do to set up the equation. And now to solve for x, which is the percent, all you do is multiply across like this and like this. So you end up with 170x is equal to 4,700. And then to isolate the x on the left side, divide both sides by 170. That gives you 27.6%. Option D. Okay, so this next set of questions are algebra problems, word problems. So the first question says, a cable television company charges $27.95 a month for basic cable and $8.95 for each additional premium channel. And it says, if Lori's bill is $73.05, how many premium channels is she getting? Okay, so the first thing that I would do is set up your equation. I always like to think of it in words before I think of it in numbers. So for example, so it would look like this. You have your total bill or your cost would be the monthly charge, which for basic cable, right, which was $27.95, plus any additional channels that you get. Okay, so each additional channel we know is $8.95, and we will multiply that by x, okay, because depending on how many additional channels you get, it's going to cost you more. Okay, so, and we don't know how many channels she has. All right, so your equation would look like that, and then everything would be equal to $73.05, which was her bill. Okay, so now all you have to do is isolate the x. So you would subtract on the left side 27.95. Okay, so that gives you 0. Do the same thing on the right side, and you end up with this. And now in order to isolate that x, you would divide both sides by 8.95, like this, and that gives you 5. Okay, so she basically got 5. She got her monthly basic cable plus 5 additional premium channels. Answer B. Okay, Joe's Gym charges $75 for a sign-up fee and $35 per month. Fitness Factory charges $120 sign-up fee and $20 per month. For what number of months is the cost the same? All right, so first of all, again, set up your equation so it would be similar to the one that we saw before, right? So we have a gym with a fixed sign-up fee plus a monthly fee multiplied by X number of months. And they're asking us when would both of these gyms, when would the cost of both of these gyms be the same? Okay, so if we set up our equation, on the left side, Joe's Gym, they tell us that the sign-up fee is $75 plus the monthly fee, which is $35, and we multiply that by X, okay, because we don't know how many number of months we will be there. And then on the right side, Fitness Factory, they tell us that the sign-up fee is $120 plus $20 per month. And again, we would multiply that number by X, okay, because we don't know how many months we will use it. All right, so what we do now is that we're going to solve for X. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 20X from the right side. And remember that what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I would do the same thing on the left, like this. And that leaves me with this number. Okay, and now I want to isolate that X on the left side. So I would subtract 75 from the left side and 75 from the right side. That gives me 15X is equal to 45. And now in order to isolate that X, what I have to do is divide both sides by 15, like this, and that gives me 3. Okay, and it's always a good idea to check your work. So how do you check your work? Well, we go back to our equation, and wherever we have an X, we're going to replace it with that 3. Okay, so on the left side, we would say $75 plus 35X. We would replace that X by 3. And we would do that same thing on the right side, okay? Instead of 20x, 20 multiplied by 3. So if you solve those equations, you end up with 180 is equal to 180, okay? So this is correct. Okay, so this next few questions are a little bit tricky. They are system of equations problems, okay? So it tells you one cleaning product solution contains 7% alcohol. Another cleaning solution contains 12% alcohol. How many liters of each solution should be combined to create 10 liters of a cleaning product that is 9% alcohol? All right, so this is quite a mouthful. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is kind of take it step by step. All right, you have to set up two equations. First of all, let's name our solution at 7%. We're going to call that one solution X. And the solution at 12% alcohol, we're going to call Y. And the first equation that we're going to set up is for the total number of liters of a solution. Okay, so in the question they tell us that we have to end up with 10 liters by combining solution X and solution Y. Okay, so X plus Y is going to equal to 10. And we are going to solve for one of the variables. So let's solve for y in this case. Okay, so y is equal to 10 minus x. All right, so you're going to forget this for a second, and now we're going to go back to our problem, and we're going to set up a second equation for the percent of the solution. Okay, so so we're going to here, first of all, change those percentages to a decimal form. So 7% would be 0.07, and 12% would be 0.12. I'm sorry, there's a mistake there. I wrote 0.09. That is incorrect. It would be 0.12. Okay, so if we set up our equation like this, we would say that 0.07 of solution x, right, which plus the same 0.12 of y is equal to our final solution, right, which is at 9%, or 0.09, and is 10 liters. All right, so this is where you go back to the equation that you got in step 1, okay, which said that y is equal to 10 minus x. And what you're going to do is you're now going to plug this equation into this second equation. So wherever you have a y, you're going to put 10 minus x. Okay, like this. And now all you have to do is multiply that bracket out. So we would multiply 0.12 by 10, and then 0.12 multiplied by minus x, and we would get that number. All right, and the next thing we want to do is we want to clean it up a little bit on the left side. So we would add common terms. So we would say 0.07 minus 0.12. That gives us minus 0.05x, like this. Okay, and now now it's kind of easier from now. Now all you have to do is isolate that x value. So on the left side, you would subtract 1.2 minus 1.2. So that cancels out. Do the same thing on the right side, and you end up with this. And now what you do is divide both sides by negative 0.05. And that would give you x is equal to 6. Okay, you're not done yet, because now the question is asking you how many liters of each solution should be combined to create 10 liters. So what you do is you're going to take that equation you just found, x is equal to 6, plug it into your first equation like this. That gives you y is equal to 4. So that's the solution. You would use 4 liters of solution y, which was at 12%, 6 liters of solution x, which was at 7%. Okay, so answer is A. So these are a little bit more tricky. Yeah, don't get stressed if you don't get it immediately, okay? Because you have to be doing kind of going back and forth between equations. Okay, question 19. A phone company charges a monthly rate of $13.07, and then it charges 23 cents a minute per call. Richard's bill for M minutes is $26.15. How many minutes was Richard charged on his bill? Okay, so what we want to do here is first of all set up your equation and solve for M. So once again, kind of work it out in words. The total bill would be equal to your monthly flat rate, okay, which was $13.07, plus the number of minutes that you spoke, which is, remember, each minute is 23 cents, multiplied by the number of minutes, or M, that you spoke, okay? So like this. And then the total bill, they tell us, was for $26.15. Okay, so this is the equation that you're going to set up. And now all you have to do is you want to isolate that M on the left side by subtracting $13.07 on the left. Do the same thing on the right. you end up with this amount. And now what you want to do is divide both sides by 0.23. That gives you m is equal to 56.87. Okay, and this is rounded. I think the correct answer was 56.8666 or something like this. All right, so the correct answer would be B. Okay, question 20. Question 20 is another system of equations problem. Okay, so this is where you have to set up various equations, as we saw before, and kind of being introducing one equation into the other to solve. So it says 185 students went on a field trip. Some students rode in a van, which holds 9 students each, and some students rode the bus, which holds 25 students each. How many buses did they use if there were 17 vehicles in total? All right, so let's first set up our equation for the total number of vehicles. So they're telling us there were 17 vehicles in total, and these vehicles were vans and buses, right? So we have vans plus buses is equal to 17. So we're going to change this into mathematical terms. We're going to call the vans x and the buses y. So we end up with x plus y is equal to 17. And now I'm going to solve, because they're asking us in the questions how many buses that they use, and buses was the variable y. We're going to solve this equation for y. Okay, so we end up with y is equal to 17 minus x. Great. Okay, so we're going to forget this for a second, and now we're going to set up our second equation, which looks at the number of students per vehicle. So this is kind of how I like to do it in words. So we know that the number of students multiplied by the number of vans used plus number of students multiplied by the number of buses is going to equal the total number of students. All right, so we know that the vans, they're in blue, hold 9 students each, and we said that the van was the value for x, so we're going to say 9x plus the number of students and the number of buses, the number of students, 25, multiplied by the number of buses. Remember that buses was going to be y. And all of this is equal to 185 students, which was the number of students that went on the field trip. Okay, so now that you set up this equation, we're going to go back to our first equation, which was there in pink on the left. And wherever you have a y, you're going to introduce 17 minus x. Okay, so you're going to take that equation, and now you're going to introduce that value instead. All you have to do now is multiply that 25 by the contents in the bracket. So we would say 25 multiplied by 17, that's 425, and 25 multiplied by minus x, which is minus 25x. Okay, so that is what your equation ends up looking like. All right, so now what we're going to do is on your left side, we're going to try to clean it up a little bit by getting rid of that 425. Okay, so we're going to subtract 425 from the left, do the same thing from the right. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add common terms. Okay, so we're going to add that 9x minus 25x on the left side. So that's going to give us minus 16x is equal to minus 240 from the right side. And now all you do, divide both sides by minus 16. That gives you x is equal to 15. All right, you're almost there, right? So now with this number that we have, x is equal to 15, we're going to introduce it back into equation 1, which was there. Okay, so we said that in total there were 17 vehicles made up of vans and buses. We said that vans were x, buses were y, and then we had solved for y, okay, which was the number of buses. We now have the value for vans, which was x. So you simply introduce that number 15 where the x value is. You end up with 17 minus 15 is equal to 2, which is answer B. All right, always really useful to check your work. So if we go back to our equations, So this is with the answers that we got, 15 vans and 2 buses. So remember, from the question, they tell us that the van holds 9 students. So if we multiply 15 vans times 9 students, that gives us 135 students. And if we multiply the number of buses, 2 buses, times 25, that gives us 50 students. If you add these two numbers together, that gives you 185, okay, which is the total number of students that went on the field trip. Okay, so this next section, we're going to talk about polynomials. We're going to start with adding polynomials. All right, so they're giving you this set of polynomials, and they're asking you to put the answer in the box below. So just remember, whenever you have to add or subtract polynomials, what you want to do is you want to add like terms first. What do we mean by this? Well, we mean every number that has the same exponent. So in this case, we would add 5x to the third power minus 4x to the third. That would be one set of terms. Then we would add the x's, so 2x plus x, and then we would add the whole numbers like this, okay? So that's step 1. And then step 2 is that you're going to combine the results that you got before into one single polynomial equation like this. Okay, so if we go back to our problem, step 1 we said was combine like terms. So first of all, let's add all of those terms that are x raised to the second power. So it would be 5x squared plus 2x squared. That gives us 7x squared. Next, we're going to look at those terms that just have an x. So we would say x plus 3x is equal to 4x. And then we're going to add our whole numbers. So 9 plus minus 10, which is equal to minus 1. All right, so that's step 1. Step 2, we're going to take all these numbers and now combine them into a single polynomial. So we end up with 7x squared plus 4x minus 1. Okay, question 22 is similar, but there's one additional step. If you look at the second bracket, you can see that you already have some common terms there. So before you start, you want to simplify those first. Okay, so simplify that second parentheses and then rewrite your equation. So this equation would actually end up being 3x squared plus 8x, okay, because minus 7x plus 15x is 8x. Okay, so this is the new equation that we would be working with. All right, now you can go ahead and do step 2, which is the same thing that we saw before, which is to combine like terms. So first of all, let's look at those terms that are raised to the second power. So we would say 7x plus 3x squared in both cases is equal to 10x squared. Then all those terms with an x, so 6x plus 8x is going to equal 14x, and then you have one whole number, which is minus 4. And then, once again, you want to take all those numbers and then combine them together, and now you end up with your single equation or your single polynomial. Okay, question 23 looks at subtracting polynomials, and this is a little bit trickier because what you have here is you have a negative sign that can mess you up. All right, so what you want to do here is you want to first distribute the negative sign onto the second parentheses. Okay, so this is the second parentheses. So you have minus, 15x squared. I'm sorry, I missed the square bit there. So what you want to do is you want to multiply that negative sign, so by that 15x squared. You also want to multiply that negative sign by the 7 and by the minus 3. Okay, so you would end up with 15x squared. I apologize again, I've missed that number, minus 7x, and then plus 3, okay? Because remember that when you multiply a negative number by a negative number, it gives you a positive number, okay? So minus 3 is actually plus 3. All right, so now you have your new equation, which looks like that, and once again, you do what you did before, so you're going to go ahead and combine like terms, starting with those terms which are raised to the power of 2. So you end up with 5x squared minus 15x squared is going to equal minus 10x squared. Then you're going to look at the values with x, so minus 3x minus 7x is equal to 10x. And then minus 4 plus 3 is equal to minus 1. And once again, you're going to take all of those numbers and combine them into a single polynomial, which looks like this. All right, question 24 is also subtracting polynomials, but once again, if you look at the parentheses, you can see that there's actually common terms in both parentheses. So the first thing that you want to do is that you want to clean these up a little bit and rewrite your equation. Okay, so the parentheses on the left, which looks like that, would simplified be minus 2a squared minus a minus 4. And if you look at the one on the right side, it would end up being minus 4a squared minus a minus 10. Okay, so if we go ahead and rewrite the equation, now a little bit cleaned up, that's the new equation. Okay, great. So because we are subtracting, remember that your next step would be to distribute that negative sign before the second parentheses. So you would multiply that negative multiplied by negative 4a squared multiplied by negative a and multiplied by negative 10. So you end up with positive 4a squared plus a plus 10. Okay, and now that you've distributed the negative sign, you can go ahead and combine like terms as you would normally. Okay, starting with those terms raised to the second power, like this. Then those that do not have an exponent, so you would say minus a plus a, that gives you 0. They cancel each other out. And the whole numbers, minus 4 plus 10, which is going to equal 6. You're going to take those numbers and then combine them into a single polynomial, as you can see there on the right. Okay, question 25. Once again, you have one of these polynomials that you're subtracting, and you can see that there is common terms already inside each of these parentheses. So step 1, simplify those common terms first. Okay, so in the first equation, you would add those two numbers first. That's what you get. 11x squared plus 2x squared is 11x squared. Okay, plus x plus 9. And then in the second bracket there on the right side, you would add those common terms, and it would give you that number. All right, so that's the new kind of the simplified equation. All right, so now that you have this new equation, let's just rewrite it like that. And what you want to do is that you want to distribute that negative sign. Okay, so multiply that negative sign by 5x squared, by 5x, and by negative 12. And you end up with the equation that you see below. All right, and then now you can go ahead and combine like terms. All right, so starting with those terms that are raised to the second power again. So 11x squared minus 5x squared is 6x squared. Then you're going to work on the x values. So x minus 5x is equal to minus 4x, and then you're going to look at your whole numbers. 9 plus 12, which is going to equal 21. And finally, take all those numbers and combine them into a single polynomial. Okay, folks, well, this concludes part 1 of the 50-question quiz. The second part is coming up in a couple of days, so stay tuned for that. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. If you found this useful, please consider subscribing or sharing with your friends. And as always, have a terrific rest of your day or evening. Thank you.